The knife touched Lucas Hartwell's throat before he could speak. Grace Porter was 11 years old. She was starving. She was shaking so hard the blade rattled against his skin, but her voice did not shake. "One more step," she whispered, "and I'll kill you." Behind her, in the darkness of the cabin that was dying faster than the children inside it, 4 small shapes huddled together like animals in a trap. Danny, 9 years old, leg twisted from birth, eyes sharp as broken glass. Lily, 7, clutching a cloth doll named Patience, lips sealed shut since the day her parents died. Zay, 6, skin dark as fertile earth, trying to make himself invisible. And Ruby May, 4 years old, lying still as stone on a pile of rag skin, gray-white, breathing in shallow, broken gasps. The stranger did not step back, did not raise his hands, just looked at Grace with eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. "Go ahead," Lucas said. His voice was low, rough, like distant thunder. "But if you kill me, who's going to save your sister?" Grace looked down at Ruby. The 4-year-old had not opened her eyes in 2 days. Fever burned through her small body. Her lungs were drowning. She was dying. The knife trembled in Grace's hand. "Why?" she breathed, and for the first time her voice cracked. "Why would you care?" Lucas Hartwell, 39 years old, widower, drunk survivor of Gettysburg, and the fire that had taken everything worth living for, looked at these 5 children and felt something stir in his chest. Something he thought had died in Kansas 4 years ago when he'd come home to find his house burning and his wife Sarah screaming his daughter's name from inside the flames. "Because somebody has to," he said. "Because I stopped walking past." The cabin was 15 degrees below zero. No smoke rose from the chimney. The walls leaned drunk against the winter wind. The door hung on one hinge. This was where the good people of Frost Hollow, Montana had left 5 orphans to freeze and starve for 2 months, while they told themselves it was someone else's problem. But 30 minutes earlier, Lucas hadn't known these children existed. 30 minutes earlier, he'd been ready to die. The road to Frost Hollow cut through snow that came up to his horse's chest. December in Montana Territory was not a season. It was a weapon. Lucas rode through it with a bottle of whiskey in his saddlebag and a revolver in his coat and the medallion around his neck that he touched every few miles like a man checking to see if his heart still beat. The medallion held a photograph. Emma Hartwell, 5 years old, dark curls, gap-toothed smile. Dead 4 years, 3 months, and 16 days. Not that Lucas was counting. Not that he touched the medallion every morning and thought about putting the revolver in his mouth instead. "I'm sorry, baby girl," he whispered to the photograph, to the ghost, to the memory that followed him everywhere he ran. "Daddy couldn't save you." Kansas, 1875. He'd been out with the cattle when the fire started. By the time he'd seen the smoke and ridden home, the house was an inferno. Sarah had run back inside for Emma. Neither of them made it out. Lucas had stood in the ashes and screamed until his voice broke, and then he'd stopped screaming and started running, and he'd been running ever since. Years of whiskey and wanted posters and waking up in towns whose names he couldn't remember. Years of trying to drink himself to death or find someone willing to kill him. Years of failure at both. Frost Hollow appeared through the snow like a mirage. Small, isolated, perfect for a man who wanted to disappear. Lucas aimed his horse toward the saloon, already tasting the whiskey, already planning to drink, until the bartender cut him off, or the money ran out, or his liver finally gave up the fight. But outside the general store, 2 women were talking. "Those Porter orphans won't last another week." The speaker was Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, 55, thin as a knife, wrapped in a fur coat that cost more than most families earned in a year. The woman beside her, Mrs. Perkins, softer, rounder, guilty, nodded. "Reverend Crane's coming Tuesday," Mrs. Perkins said. "Taking them east. Best thing for them, really." 5 children, no parents, middle of winter, Mrs. Whitmore agreed. "What else can anyone do?" Lucas's horse stopped moving. Something in those words had caught in his chest like a fish hook. 5 children, he said. His voice came out like gravel. "Where?" The women turned. They looked at him the way frontier women looked at drifters, measuring threat, calculating worth, deciding if he was dangerous or just pathetic. "Miller's cabin," Mrs. Whitmore said after a pause. "Edge of town. But don't trouble yourself, mister. They're spoken for. Spoken for the Children's Aid Society, Mrs. Perkins explained, not meeting his eyes. Reverend Crane runs it. Takes orphans to good families back east. Lucas knew about those good families. Knew about the coal mines in Pennsylvania that paid 50 cents a head for small bodies that could fit in tight spaces. Knew about the textile mills that worked 10-year-olds 16 hours a day until their fingers bled and their lungs filled with cotton dust. Knew about the special arrangements for colored children because they were worth more to the mines. How long they been alone? Silence. Since the typhoid, Mrs. Perkins said finally. 2 months, maybe more. Someone feeding them? The silence stretched longer. We've done what we can, Mrs. Whitmore said, defensive now. Left food when we could spare it. Winter's hard on everyone. Lucas looked at their fur coats, their warm gloves, the packages from the general store clutched in their arms. Hard on everyone. Which way? Mrs. Whitmore pointed. Lucas turned his horse without another word. He didn't go because he was good. Lucas Hartwell had stopped being good the day he'd let his family burn. He went because as he rode away from those women, he heard Emma's voice in his head, clear as church bells on a Sunday morning. Stop running, Daddy. Help them. He'd been hearing her voice since she died. Usually it was screaming. This time it was calm. The cabin appeared through the trees like something from a nightmare. Walls leaning, roof half collapsed, no smoke, no light, no sound except the wind and his own breathing, and somewhere faint, the wet rattle of a child drowning in her own lungs. Lucas tied his horse to a post that looked ready to fall over. The animal whinnied, nervous. Won't be long, he told her. He was wrong about that. The door hung crooked. He pushed it open, slow hands visible, voice low. Anyone here? I'm not armed. Just want to help. That's when Grace came at him with the knife. Now standing in the frozen dark with a blade at his throat and 5 pairs of eyes watching from the shadows, Lucas understood what he was looking at. Not orphans, survivors, not victims, warriors. This 11-year-old girl had kept 4 younger children alive for 2 months in conditions that would have killed most adults. She'd begged for food, stolen when begging failed, fought off anyone who tried to take advantage. And now she stood between Lucas and her family with a rusty knife and a will made of iron and absolutely no reason to trust a single word he said. My name is Lucas Hartwell, he said slowly, and I'm about to make you a promise. Everyone makes promises, Grace said. The knife didn't waver. Nobody keeps them. Lucas knelt, slow, deliberate, until his eyes were level with hers. I'm going to get a doctor for your sister. I'm going to get food and firewood and whatever else you need, and I'm going to make sure nobody takes you anywhere you don't want to go. Why? The question hit him like a fist to the chest. Why? Because years ago he'd made the same promise to his own daughter and failed. Because he'd spent every day since running from graves he couldn't bear to visit. Because this girl, this fierce, starving, desperate girl, looked at him with eyes that expected nothing and deserved everything. Because 4 years ago, Lucas said, and his voice broke on the words, I made the same promise to my daughter, and I failed her. I let my wife Sarah and my little girl Emma die in a fire while I was out with the cattle. I've been running from that ever since. He reached up, pulled the medallion over his head, placed it in Grace's palm. This belonged to my daughter, Emma. She was 5 years old, died in the flames while I wasn't there to save her. It's the only thing I have left of her. Grace opened the medallion. In the dim light filtering through the broken roof, she could just make out the photograph. A little girl with dark curls and a gap-toothed smile. Lucas's throat closed. He forced the words out anyway. I've been running for 4 years. Tonight something made me stop. Maybe it was Emma's voice. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just finally being tired of running. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. He closed Grace's fingers around the medallion. You hold on to that. When this is over, when you're safe, you give it back to me. That way you'll know I'm coming back. For a long moment, Grace just stared at him. Behind her, Lucas could hear Danny's careful breathing, Zay's terrified silence, Lily's complete stillness, and underneath it all, Ruby's wet, rattling gasps. Then Grace, who had not cried in 2 months, who had been too busy keeping her siblings alive to let herself feel anything, who had learned that tears were a luxury she could not afford, looked at the medallion in her hand, and her face crumpled. The knife clattered to the floor. She didn't make a sound, just stood there, with tears streaming down her cheeks and her whole body shaking, and the medallion clutched so tight her knuckles went white. Danny stepped forward, put a hand on her shoulder, and started crying too, silent tears that he tried to hide by turning his face away. Zay wrapped his arms around Lily, and even though Lily's face didn't change, didn't react, a single tear rolled down her cheek. Lucas picked up the knife, set it aside, and looked at the 4-year-old lying on the pile of rags. How long since she woke up? Grace wiped her face with the back of her hand. 2 days. Lucas crossed to Ruby, knelt beside her, pressed his hand to her forehead, and felt fire and ice at the same time. Fever high enough to kill, skin cold enough to mean it was trying. "What's her name?" "Ruby May Porter," Danny said. His voice was flat, controlled. The voice of a 9-year-old who'd had to grow up too fast. "She's 4. 4 years old. Same age Emma had been." Lucas touched Ruby's face, so small, so still. "I'm getting the doctor." "Dr. Hayes won't come," Grace said. Her voice was bitter, now hard. "I already asked. He's scared of typhoid, says we're contagious." "Is it typhoid?" "No, our parents had typhoid. This is different. It's in her lungs." "Pneumonia." Lucas had seen it in army camps. Seen men drown in their own bodies, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Seen children die because there was no doctor, or the doctor wouldn't come, or the parents couldn't pay. "Hayes is coming whether he wants to or not." He stood, started for the door. Behind him a small voice stopped him. "Mr. Lucas," he turned. Zay had stepped forward. 6 years old, pressed against Lily like a shadow, eyes huge and hopeful and terrified all at once. "Are you going to help me too, or just them?" The question landed like a blow. Lucas looked at this 6-year-old boy with skin the color of good earth and eyes that already knew what it meant to be different, to be less, to be worth more to the minds than to the people who should have cared. Lucas knelt again, 3rd time in 5 minutes. His knees would hurt tomorrow, but he didn't care. "Why wouldn't I help you?" Zay's eyes dropped. "Some folks say colored children don't count the same." Grace made a sharp sound. "Zay, that's just what Mrs. Whitmore said when I asked her for bread. She said the Aid Society has special arrangements for children like you." Lucas felt something dark and hot rise in his chest. He looked at Zay and made his voice as gentle as he could. "Look at me, son." Zay looked up. "You see 5 children in this cabin." A nod. "I see 5 children in this cabin. Anyone tells you different, you send them to me. Understand?" Zay nodded again, slower this time, like he wanted to believe but wasn't quite ready to trust. Lucas turned to the last child, Lily. 7 years old, clutching that cloth doll, staring at nothing, with eyes that had seen her parents die, and decided the world was too terrible to speak to anymore. "What's her name?" "Lily Rose," Danny answered quietly. "She used to talk all the time, before the parents died, before she watched them die." Lucas closed his eyes. 5 children, 1 dying, 1 mute from trauma, 1 crippled, 1 marked by skin color that would make half the territory want him gone, and 1 11-year-old girl trying to hold them all together with nothing but willpower and a rusty knife. He opened his eyes. "I'll be back. 1 hour. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." "How do we know you'll come back?" Grace's voice was hard again, protecting herself from hope. Lucas looked at the medallion in her hands. Emma's medallion. The only piece of his daughter he had left. "Because as long as you have that," he said, "you'll know I'm coming back. That's my daughter. That's my whole heart. I don't leave my heart behind." Something shifted in Grace's face. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of something that might become trust if given time. 1 hour, she said. 1 hour? Lucas agreed. He walked out into the frozen night. The wind cut through his coat like knives. The snow crunched under his boots. And for the first time in 4 years, Lucas Hartwell had somewhere to be, someone counting on him, a reason to come back. Behind him in the dying cabin, 5 children watched the door close. Grace clutched the medallion. Danny calculated odds. Lily held her doll. Zay pressed close to his siblings. And Ruby Mae Porter lay dying, her small chest rising and falling in rhythm with the ticking clock. 1 hour. Lucas mounted his horse and rode toward town. Toward the saloon where Dr. Samuel Hayes was 3 drinks deep and about to have a very bad night. Toward the confrontation that would change everything. Toward the moment when a broken man stopped running from his past and started fighting for someone else's future. The medallion was gone from his neck. For 4 years, he'd worn it like a chain, like penance, like proof that he'd failed the person who mattered most. Now it hung around the neck of an 11-year-old girl he'd known for 10 minutes. And somehow that felt right. Somehow that felt like Emma would have wanted it. "I'm trying, baby girl," he whispered to the wind, to the ghost, to the memory. "I'm trying to do better." The wind didn't answer. But somewhere in the spaces between the snowflakes and the stars, Lucas thought he heard his daughter's voice one more time. "I know, Daddy. I know." He kicked his horse into a gallop and rode toward Frost Hollow and the fight that was about to begin. Behind him, 5 children waited in the dark. Ahead of him, a town that had forgotten how to care. And somewhere in between, a man who'd lost everything, finding one last reason not to give up. The stranger had stopped walking past. Now he had to prove it meant something. 1 hour. The clock was ticking. The Silver Star Saloon was warm and loud and full of people who were not thinking about 5 children freezing to death 400 yards away. Lucas pushed through the door. Snow dusted his shoulders. His boots left wet prints on the wooden floor. The room smelled like whiskey and tobacco and the particular kind of guilt that men tried to drown in both. He spotted Dr. Samuel Hayes immediately. Thin man, spectacles, 3 drinks deep at a corner table holding court about the philosophical complexities of frontier medicine to anyone who would listen. His audience was 2 ranch hands who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Lucas walked straight to him. No greeting, no introduction. "You Dr. Hayes?" Hayes looked up with blurry eyes. "Who's asking?" "There's a child dying in Miller's cabin, 4 years old, fever, lungs full of fluid. You're coming with me right now." Hayes laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was bitter and self-satisfied and made Lucas want to put his fist through the man's face. "Those Porter brats, I don't think so. Typhoid house. I go near them, I risk my own health." Lucas grabbed him by the throat. The saloon went silent. 20 conversations stopped mid-sentence. Cards froze in dealers' hands. Even the piano player lifted his fingers from the keys. Lucas's voice was quiet, conversational, more dangerous than shouting would have been. "Let me explain something. That child is going to see a doctor tonight. You can walk there on your own feet, or I can drag you by your hair. Pick." Hayes clawed at Lucas's hand. "This is Assault Sheriff Sheriff Coulter." A chair scraped. Boots on wood. A voice like rusted iron. "What's going on here?" Lucas didn't let go of Hayes's throat. Didn't turn around. 5 children are dying in Miller's cabin. This man refuses to treat them. Those orphans." The voice moved closer, into Lucas's peripheral vision. Big man, salt and pepper hair, scar across his forehead like someone had tried to split his skull and failed. "Nothing to be done for them. Reverend Crane's taking them east on Tuesday. Over my dead body. That can be arranged, stranger." Now Lucas turned. Sheriff James Coulter stood 3 feet away, hand resting on his pistol. His eyes were hard, calculating. And then something shifted in them. Recognition bloomed like blood in water. "I know you," Coulter said slowly. "Gettysburg. You were Union artillery. I was Confederate infantry. I watched you blow apart half my company with a cannon." Lucas released Hayes, faced the sheriff fully. 2 men who'd tried to kill each other 15 years ago meeting again in a Montana saloon over 5 children neither of them knew. "War's over, Coulter." "Is it?" The sheriff's hand stayed on his gun. "Seems to me you're still fighting something." "I'm fighting to save 5 children who your town left to die." "We didn't leave them to die. We made arrangements." Lucas stepped closer, close enough that Coulter had to look up slightly to meet his eyes. "You made arrangements to ship them east like cattle, to factories and mines and God knows what else. That's not saving them, that's selling them." Coulter's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about this town or those children. I know what I saw. 5 kids alone in a cabin with no fire, no food, and a 4-year-old drowning in her own lungs. I know your good people walk past every day and tell themselves it's someone else's problem. You're a stranger here. You've got no right. Lucas's voice went cold. I've got no right. I've got no right to care about children starving to death. I've got no right to demand a doctor treat a dying child. What rights do I need, Sheriff? What papers do I have to file to give a damn? The silence in the saloon was absolute. 20 men held their breath, waiting to see if this would end in words or bullets. Then from the back of the room, a woman's voice. I'll go with him. Everyone turned. Sarah Bennett stood in the doorway that led to the kitchen. 35 years old, dark hair pulled back, apron still dusted with flour, plain features but eyes that had seen trouble and chosen to face it anyway. She was the baker's widow, had been for 3 years, ran the shop alone now and fed half the town and asked nothing in return. Sarah, Coulter said, and there was warning in his voice. Stay out of this. No. She walked toward Lucas. Ignored the stares, ignored the whispers starting up around the room. I've got soup on my stove and bread in my oven. Those children need food more than they need you men standing here arguing. She looked at Dr. Hayes with undisguised contempt. You want to know what's killing that baby, doctor? It's not typhoid, it's pneumonia. I've seen it before. My own sister died of it because the doctor in our town was too scared to treat her. Her voice hardened. You going to let another child die because you're a coward? Hayes's face went white, then red. He looked from Sarah to Lucas to Coulter and back again. Finally he reached for his medical bag with shaking hands. I'll need my instruments. Then get them, Sarah said. Coulter stepped into Lucas's path one more time. This isn't over, Hartwell. Never thought it was. They held each other's gaze. Old enemies, old wounds, something unresolved simmering underneath. Then Coulter stepped aside. We'll talk tomorrow. About those children. About what happens next. Looking forward to it. Lucas walked out into the frozen night with a drunk doctor stumbling behind him and a baker's widow leading the way. Behind them, the saloon erupted in conversation. Ahead of them, 5 children waited in the dark. The ride back to Miller's cabin took 15 minutes. It felt like hours. Hayes sobered quickly. Fear and cold had a way of burning through whiskey. Sarah rode her own horse saddlebags heavy with food. Lucas led them both through the snow following the tracks his horse had made an hour earlier. When they reached the cabin, Grace was standing in the doorway with the knife. It's me, Lucas called. I brought help. The knife lowered. Grace stepped aside. Inside, the next hour became controlled chaos. Hayes examined Ruby with hands that still shook but were steadier now. Sarah built up the fire, hung a pot of soup over the flames, began organizing the supplies she'd brought. Lucas split firewood until his arms screamed hauled water from the frozen creek, made 3 trips back to Sarah's bakery for blankets and bread, and anything else that might help. The other children watched everything. Danny positioned himself where he could see it all, cataloging, calculating, measuring Lucas against some internal standard only he understood. Grace hovered near Ruby, refused to let her sister out of sight, even when Sarah gently suggested she rest. Zay pressed close to Lily, the two of them together like survivors of a shipwreck, clinging to each other in dark water. And Lily sat in her corner, eyes open, seeing nothing. The doll patience clutched against her chest. Hayes finished his examination, stood, wiped his spectacles. It's not typhoid, pneumonia, like Mrs. Bennett said. Serious but treatable if we're not too late. Grace's voice was barely a whisper. Are we too late? I don't know. Next few hours will tell. He pulled bottles from his bag. Instruments. Bandages. I need clean water, hot as you can make it, and someone needs to keep her warm. Body heat's best. Grace moved forward. I'll do it. Lucas caught her arm, gently but firmly. No, you've been keeping them alive for 2 months. Tonight someone else takes a shift. But I have to. If I don't, she'll die. If I stop even for a minute. Lucas knelt, put himself at her eye level. Behind Grace he saw Danny watching, judging. You're 11 years old. You've done more than most adults would do, more than most adults could do, but you're exhausted. You can't help Ruby if you collapse. I won't collapse. You're shaking. Grace looked down at her hands. They were trembling. She hadn't even noticed. I can't stop, she said quietly. If I stop, I'll fall apart. Lucas's voice was gentle. Then fall apart. I'll catch you. Grace stared at him, measuring, deciding. Behind her, Lucas could see the other children leaning forward, waiting to see what their leader would do. "Why are you doing this?" Grace's voice cracked. "You don't know us, you don't owe us anything. People don't just care about strangers." Lucas thought about Emma, about Sarah, about the stranger who'd helped him and his father after his mother died, about all the times he'd walked past people who needed help because stopping meant feeling, and feeling meant hurting. Maybe I should have, a long time ago. He held out his hand. "Let me take Ruby. You get some sleep. I'll wake you if anything changes." Grace looked at his hand like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Then she took it. Sarah appeared at Grace's elbow, put an arm around the girl's shoulders. "Come on, sweetheart, let's get some food in you." Grace let herself be led away, let herself lean against Sarah Bennett. And then for the first time in 2 months, she broke. She didn't make noise, just stood there with her face pressed against Sarah's shoulder and her whole body shaking with silent sobs. 2 months of fear and exhaustion and desperate grinding responsibility poured out of her in waves. Sarah held her, stroked her hair, let her cry. And Sarah's own eyes filled with tears because she remembered being young and alone and terrified, and she remembered how much it had cost to survive. Lucas picked up Ruby. The 4-year-old was so light she felt like air, like if he let go she'd float away. He sat down with his back against the wall and held her against his chest, counting her breaths, willing his own warmth into her small body. Hayes worked quietly, mixing medicines, checking pulse, writing notes in a small leather book. Sarah got Grace to eat, then Danny, then Zay. Even convinced Lily to take a few bites of bread, though the girl's eyes never focused, never showed awareness. Around midnight, when the fire was steady and the cabin was as warm as it was going to get, Danny limped over to Lucas. The boy sat down beside him, stretched out his twisted leg. Said nothing for a full minute. "Then you were in the war." Not a question, a statement. Lucas was learning that Danny didn't ask questions he already knew the answers to. "Yes, Union artillery." "Kill anybody?" "Yes." Danny nodded, processing. The boy had a way of organizing the world through logic, through facts, through careful observation. "My pa was too young for the war. He was 13 when it ended. But he used to say the men who came back weren't the same men who left. He was right about that. You one of those men? The ones who came back wrong?" Lucas looked at this 9-year-old boy with eyes that had seen too much. "Yeah, I'm one of those." "So why should we trust you?" "Fair question." Lucas wished he had a better answer. "You shouldn't. Not yet. Trust gets earned over time." He adjusted Ruby in his arms. Her breathing was still shallow. Still wrong. But she was breathing. "But I'll tell you what I told your sister. I'm not leaving. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until I know you're safe." Danny studied him for a long moment. "That's just words. Words are cheap." Lucas met the boy's gaze. "Words are cheap. Showing up is what costs something." Danny's eyes widened slightly. Then his face did something complicated. Pain and memory and recognition all mixed together. "My pa used to say that. Almost exactly that." Silence fell between them. Lucas held Ruby. Danny sat with his thoughts. Around them, the cabin creaked in the wind. Then Danny spoke again. His voice was quieter now, thoughtful. "Pa said something else, too. He said, 'Blood doesn't make family, Danny. Choice makes family.' Every day people choose to stay or leave, choose to love or abandon. That's what makes fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters, not blood. Choice." The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. This 9-year-old boy had just summarized everything, the whole truth of what family meant, what it could mean, what it should mean. "Your father was a smart man. He's dead." "I know, I'm sorry." Danny's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted, some small piece of the wall coming down. They sat together in silence, watching the fire, listening to Ruby breathe. At 3 a.m, Ruby stirred, her eyes opened, fever bright, confused, but open. "Mama?" Lucas's heart cracked. "No, sweetheart, not Mama." "Where's Mama?" Such a small voice, such a big question. "Your Mama's not here right now, but your sister's here. Your brothers, they've been taking care of you." Ruby's lip trembled. Her small hand reached up, touched Lucas's face. "You're scratchy." Despite everything, Lucas almost smiled. "Yeah, haven't shaved in a while." Papa was scratchy too. Her eyes were starting to close again. Papa gave the best scratchy hugs. Her fingers, impossibly tiny, curled around Lucas's thumb. "Will you stay, like Papa used to?" Lucas thought about Emma asking the same thing. "Promise you'll stay, Daddy? Promise." He'd promised. He'd lied. He'd left her to go work cattle, and she'd died calling for him. His voice came out rough. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'll stay." Ruby smiled. That gap-toothed, innocent smile that reminded him so much of Emma, it physically hurt. Then she was asleep again. But this time it was just sleep, not unconsciousness, not the edge of death. Just sleep. Lucas sat there until dawn, holding that small hand, counting those precious breaths, feeling his dead heart learn to beat again. Morning came gray and bitter. Ruby's fever had broken sometime in the night. Hayes examined her again and declared her out of immediate danger. He left with a reminder that he expected payment. Lucas let him go without violence, which was more than the man deserved. Sarah packed up her things. "I've got to open the bakery, but I'll bring food at midday, proper food, not scraps." She paused at the door, looked at Lucas. "You did a good thing last night, Mr. Hartwell. This town we've let these children down, all of us." Her voice tightened. "I won't be walking past any more." She left. Lucas turned to find all 5 children watching him, Grace exhausted but alert, Danny calculating, Lily silent clutching patience, Zay hopeful and scared, Ruby weak but awake, still holding his hand. "What now?" Grace asked. "Good question. Reverend Crane was coming Tuesday, 4 days. Legal papers, legal authority, a whole system designed to turn children into commodities. Now we figure out how to fight." Danny spoke up. "Fight who, fight what? The Reverend's got the law on his side. The town won't help us. We've got nothing." Lucas looked at these 5 children, these survivors, these warriors. "You've got me. You're one man." Lucas thought about Sarah Bennett standing up in the saloon, about Sheriff Coulter stepping aside, about the look in Mrs. Whitmore's eyes when he'd confronted her outside the store. One man's enough if he doesn't quit. Grace stepped forward. She was still holding his medallion, Emma's medallion. She held it out to him. "You said your daughter told you to help us." "I did." "Did she really?" Lucas met her eyes. "I don't know. Maybe it was her voice. Maybe it was my own guilt. Maybe it was just the wind." He took a breath. "But I know what I heard, and I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to fight for you, all of you, and I'm not going to stop until you're safe." Grace looked at the medallion in her hands. Then instead of giving it back, she closed her fingers around it. "Keep it," Lucas said. "Until this is over, then give it back to me." "Why?" "Because as long as you have it, you'll know I'm coming back." Something shifted in Grace's face. Not trust, not yet. But the beginning of something that might become trust if given time. 4 days, she said. 4 days. Outside, the sun climbed over the mountains. Inside, 5 children and 1 broken man sat around a dying fire and began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The stranger had stopped walking past. Now he had to prove it meant something. 4 days until Reverend Crane came to take them away. 4 days to build a family worth fighting for. The clock was ticking. The morning after Ruby's fever broke, Lucas stood on the porch of Miller's cabin and made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't keep 5 children alive in a structure that was falling down around them. He couldn't fight Reverend Crane without allies, and he couldn't do any of it without money, a job, and a place that wouldn't collapse in the next snowstorm. Grace appeared beside him. She'd slept 4 hours, more than she'd slept in weeks. Her eyes were still hollow, but something had shifted. Some small piece of the constant terror had eased. "You're leaving," she said, "not a question. For a few hours, I'm going to find us somewhere better to stay." "What if you don't come back?" Lucas pulled out his pocket watch. Silver, dented, the only thing he owned besides the clothes on his back and the horse tied outside. He'd bought it the day Emma was born, carried it through Gettysburg, kept it even when he'd sold everything else for whiskey money. He placed it in Grace's hand. "Then you sell this and use the money to take care of them. But I will come back. Before dark. I promise." Grace looked at the watch, at him, at the medallion still hanging around her neck. "You keep giving us your things." "Things don't matter. People do." She closed her fingers around the watch. "Hurry!" Lucas rode south through snow that sparkled in the weak December sun, 10 miles to Montgomery Ranch. He'd heard about Elizabeth Montgomery in town. Widow, wealthy, no children, owned half the grazing land between Frost Hollow and Helena, hired men who could work and didn't ask questions. The ranch appeared through the trees like something from a different world. 2-story house, solid timber, smoke rising from 3 chimneys, corrals spreading out from the main buildings like spokes on a wheel, horses moving through winter pastures, cattle dotting distant hills. This was money, this was stability, this was everything those 5 children needed and would never have unless someone with power decided to help. Lucas tied his horse to the rail and knocked. The woman who answered was 60 years old and looked like she'd spent every one of those years fighting this land and winning. Gray hair pulled back severe, eyes sharp as broken glass, hands that had worked rope and reins and rifle since before Lucas was born. "Help you? Mrs. Montgomery. My name is Lucas Hartwell. I'm looking for work." She looked him over the way you'd look over a horse you were thinking of buying, measuring, assessing, deciding if he was worth the feed. "What kind of work?" "Any kind. I can break horses, mend fence, manage cattle. Did some foreman work down in Texas before I came north?" "Why'd you leave Texas?" Lucas met her eyes, told her the truth because lies always came back to bite you. "Because I buried my wife Sarah and daughter Emma there. Needed a change." Beth Montgomery's expression didn't soften, but something flickered in those sharp eyes, understanding maybe, or recognition of a particular kind of pain. Man your age drifting through in December usually means running from something. "Doesn't mean I can't work." She almost smiled. "No, I suppose it doesn't." She stepped out onto the porch, crossed her arms against the cold. "I'll be straight with you, Mr. Hartwell. I lost my foreman last month. Heart gave out. Left me short-handed going into the worst part of winter. I need someone who can manage men, handle stock, and not drink himself stupid every Saturday night." "I can do that. Pays $40 a month plus board. There's a foreman's cabin half-mile from the main house. 2 rooms. Wood stove needs some fixing up, but it's solid. 2 rooms. Enough for 5 children if they squeezed. I'll take it." Beth raised an eyebrow. "Just like that? Don't you want to see the place first? I trust it's what you say it is." "Most men would negotiate." Lucas looked at her steady. "I'm not most men, and I've got a condition." Now both eyebrows went up. "What kind of condition?" "The Porter children. 5 orphans living in Miller's cabin in town. I've taken responsibility for them. They come with me." For a long moment, Beth Montgomery just stared at him. Her face went through surprise calculation and something else. Something that might have been respect. "Those children everyone's been talking about." "Yes, ma'am." "The ones Reverend Crane's supposed to take east." "The same." "And you think you can just claim them against a man with legal papers and church backing?" Lucas's jaw set. "I don't think anything. I know what I'm going to do." Beth studied him. The wind howled between them. Somewhere in the distance a horse whinnied. Then she said, "You know those children include a colored boy?" It wasn't a question. It was a test. "Zay, he's 6 years old. Having him here would cause talk. Some of my hands might not like it." Lucas's voice went flat, cold. "Then they can find work elsewhere." For the first time since he'd knocked on her door, Beth Montgomery smiled, really smiled. It transformed her face from harsh to something almost warm. "You're either very brave or very stupid, Mr. Hartwell." "Probably both." She was quiet for a moment, looking out at her land, at the empire she'd built with her husband and maintained alone for 8 years. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, rougher. "I knew the Porter parents, Robert and Ann, good people, worked hard, loved their children, never asked for charity even when times were lean." She paused, swallowed. "When they died, I told myself I'd help, brought food once, meant to come back." Her voice tightened. "Never did. Winter got hard, ranch got busy. I let myself forget." Lucas waited, let her talk. "Most people did the same," he said quietly. That's no excuse. Beth's hands clenched on her arms. Not for me. My husband died 8 years ago. Heart attack while checking fences. We never had children. Tried for years. It just never happened. She turned to face him fully. I've got this ranch. Got money. Got more than I need. More than I'll ever spend. And I let 5 children starve because I was too busy counting cattle and tallying profits. A single tear rolled down her weathered cheek. She wiped it away, angry, like it had betrayed her. I haven't cried since Thomas's funeral, told myself I was done with tears, done with feeling sorry, but those children— Her voice broke. I walked past them, Mr. Hartwell, same as everyone else. I knew they needed help, and I walked past. Lucas stepped closer. You can't undo that. Neither can I. Neither can anyone in this town. But we can do something now. Beth looked at him. Really looked. Seeing past the rough exterior to whatever was underneath. You want the job? It's yours. You want to bring those children here? Bring them. Cabin's big enough if you don't mind close quarters. Relief hit Lucas so hard he almost staggered. Mrs. Montgomery, Beth, she interrupted. If we're going to be fighting Reverend Crane together, we might as well use first names. Fighting together. Beth's smile came back, sharp now, dangerous. You think I'm going to let that snake take children off my property after what I've heard about his special arrangements? She stepped back toward the door. I've got lawyers, Mr. Hartwell. I've got money. I've got influence in this territory that Crane doesn't know about yet. You handle the children. I'll handle the Reverend. Lucas found his voice. Why help us? Beth looked out at her land one more time, at the mountains and the sky and the endless white. Because I've spent 8 years since Thomas died just surviving, building the ranch, making money, keeping busy so I didn't have to think about how empty this house is. She met his eyes. Maybe it's time I did something that matters. Maybe those children are my chance to make up for all the times I walked past when I should have stopped. She held out her hand. We have a deal. Lucas shook it. Her grip was strong, certain. We have a deal. He rode back to Miller's cabin faster than was safe on icy roads. His mind raced with plans. Get the children to the ranch. Get them settled. Then deal with Crane. 4 days. They had 4 days. The cabin was warm when he returned. Sarah Bennett had been there. He could smell fresh bread and soup. The children were gathered around the fire. Grace stood when he entered. You came back. Said I would. He crouched down, so he was level with all of them. Grace, Danny, Lily, Zay, Ruby. 5 pairs of eyes watching him. I found us a place to stay. Montgomery Ranch, south of town. There's a cabin. 2 rooms. Wood stove. Solid roof. And Mrs. Montgomery is going to help us fight Reverend Crane. Danny spoke up. Fight how? She's got lawyers, money, influence. She thinks she can challenge his claim. Grace's arms tightened around Ruby. When do we go? Tomorrow, first light. I want us gone before Crane knows we've moved. What about our things? Danny gestured around the cabin. Our parents' things. Lucas looked at the meager possessions scattered around the room. A few clothes, some books, a photograph in a cracked frame, a china teacup wrapped in cloth, things that meant nothing to anyone except these 5 children who'd lost everything else. Grace's voice was small. It all matters. It's all we have left of them. Lucas understood that better than she knew. He still had Emma's medallion. Still touched it every day, even though it was around Grace's neck now. Then we take it all. Every last piece. They packed by firelight that night. Grace wrapped her mother's teacup in her mother's shawl. Danny organized his father's books by size, making them easier to carry. Even Zay helped folding clothes with careful precision. Only Lily sat apart, clutching patience, watching without seeing. Lucas knelt beside her. Lily, we're going somewhere safe tomorrow. A ranch with horses and warm rooms and plenty of food. Would you like that? No response. But her fingers tightened on the doll. That's Patience, right? Your doll. Nothing. Danny told me you used to talk all the time, used to sing, used to be the brightest one of all. Still nothing. But something flickered in her eyes. Some small recognition. Lucas kept his voice gentle. I'm not going to ask you to talk. I'm not going to push. But I want you to know that whenever you're ready, I'll be listening. Lily's hand moved, slowly, carefully, until it rested on his arm, just for a second. Then it was gone, but it was something. Morning came cold and clear. Lucas borrowed a wagon from the stable where Sarah's late husband had kept his equipment. He loaded everything the children owned, every book, every piece of clothing, every scrap of memory. The children climbed in among their belongings, refugees fleeing a war that had already taken their parents. Grace looked back at Miller's cabin one last time, the place where she'd kept her siblings alive for 2 months, the place where her parents had died, the place she'd defended with a knife and willpower and nothing else. "Ready?" Lucas asked. "No," she said quietly, "but let's go anyway." They rolled out of town as the sun cleared the mountains. Lucas kept watch, half expecting Crane to appear from some shadow waving his papers demanding his property. But the streets were empty. The good people of Frost Hollow were still in their warm beds, not thinking about 5 orphans or the stranger trying to save them. The ranch road was rough but passable. Ruby slept against Grace's shoulder. Danny cataloged everything they passed with those sharp eyes. Zay kept up a quiet commentary for Lily, pointing out birds and trees and the way the snow sparkled in the sunlight. "Look, Lily, a hawk. See how it circles? Papa used to say hawks were good luck." Lily didn't respond, but she looked where he pointed. Progress. Halfway to the ranch, Zay crawled forward to where Lucas sat driving the wagon. "Mister?" "Lucas." "Yeah, son?" Zay's voice was small, careful. "When we get to the ranch, will the other people there hate me because of my skin?" Lucas stopped the wagon, turned to face the 6-year-old boy with eyes too old for his face. "Listen to me, Zay. You see 5 children in this wagon?" "Yes, sir." "I see 5 children in this wagon. Anyone tells you different, you send them to me. Understand?" Zay looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "My papa used to say something like that. He said, 'Zay, some people will look at you and only see your skin, but the people who matter will look at you and see your heart. Those are the ones who become real family.'" Lucas's throat closed. "Your father was a smart man." The foreman's cabin appeared through the trees, small but solid, smoke already rising from the chimney where someone had come ahead to build a fire. "This is it?" Grace asked. "This is it?" She looked at the cabin, at Lucas, back at the cabin. "It's so small. It's warm. It's safe. It's ours." Inside was sparse but clean. Someone Beth's doing, he assumed, had stocked the shelves with food, laid out blankets on the beds, even left dried flowers in a jar on the table. Ruby woke as they carried her inside. "Where are we?" "Home," Lucas said. The word felt strange in his mouth. He hadn't called anywhere home in 4 years. "Home?" Ruby repeated. Then she smiled, that gap-toothed, innocent smile. "I like home." They spent the afternoon settling in. Grace organized the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd been running a household for months. Danny claimed a corner for his books. Zay appointed himself Ruby's guardian, and Lily sat by the window, watching the snow, holding patience, somewhere far away. Around midday, Beth Montgomery rode up with supplies, more food, winter clothes for the children, boots that actually fit, a ham that made Grace's eyes go wide. But she also brought news. "Crane knows you've moved." Lucas's jaw tightened. "How? Mrs. Whitmore saw your wagon leaving town, told the Reverend within the hour." Beth's expression was grim. "He's not happy. Came to my ranch office this morning, demanding to know what I thought I was doing harboring his children." "What did you tell him?" "I told him these children aren't his, never were, and if he wants to discuss their future, he can do it through my lawyers." "How'd he take that?" "About as well as you'd expect. Quoted scripture at me, threatened to bring the matter before the territorial judge." She paused. "He also mentioned you specifically. Said you're an outsider with no legal standing. Said any claim you make can be challenged and overturned." Lucas had expected that. "What else?" "I've sent word to my lawyer in Helena, Thomas Whitfield. He's coming tomorrow to discuss guardianship papers. We need to make this legal before Crane can move." After Beth left, Lucas stood on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Behind him, inside the cabin, he could hear the children. Grace organizing, Danny reading aloud, Ruby laughing at something Zay said. A family, beginning to form from broken pieces. He didn't hear Grace come out until she spoke. "There's a letter on the table. It came while you were outside." Lucas's blood went cold. Inside an envelope sat on the kitchen table. Official paper, seal, signature. Thomas Whitfield, attorney at law, Helena, Montana. He opened it with hands that wanted to shake. The words blurred, then sharpened, then hit him like a fist to the gut. Mr. Hartwell, Mrs. Montgomery has retained me to represent you in the matter of guardianship for the Porter children. I must inform you that Reverend Crane has moved faster than anticipated. He has filed for an emergency order. The hearing is not Tuesday, December 21st, as previously believed. The hearing is Saturday, December 20th. 10 a.m., 6 days. I will arrive tomorrow to prepare, Thomas Whitfield. Lucas read it twice, 3 times. Everything in him went cold, from a week to 4 days. Grace appeared at his shoulder. What does it say? Lucas folded the letter, tried to keep his voice steady. Just that the lawyer is coming tomorrow. But Danny was watching from across the room, and Danny saw through lies the way he saw through everything else. 4 days until Reverend Crane tried to take them away. 4 days to build a case strong enough to beat a man with legal papers and church backing and years of experience selling children to the highest bidder. 4 days to prove that sometimes strangers who stop walking past matter more than systems that never cared in the first place. Lucas looked at the 5 children gathered in the small cabin, his children now in every way that mattered except the one that counted in court. 4 days. The clock was ticking. Morning broke gray over Montgomery Ranch. Lucas hadn't slept. He'd sat by the fire all night watching the children breathe, watching them dream, knowing that in 4 days a judge would decide if they got to keep those dreams or lose them to factories and mines and men who saw them as inventory. At first light he gathered them around the table. Grace saw his face and knew immediately. Something's wrong. The hearing. It's not next week. It's Saturday, 4 days from now. The silence that followed was absolute. Danny spoke first. His voice was flat, controlled, the way it got when he was processing something too big to feel. 4 days. That's not enough time. It has to be. For what? Grace's hands were shaking. For a stranger with no legal rights to convince a judge that he should keep 5 children away from an organization backed by the church and the government. Lucas looked at her, at all of them. For me to prove that I'm your family, that you chose me and I chose you, and that matters more than any paper Reverend Crane can wave around. Ruby climbed into his lap. She did that now, every morning, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Are they going to take us away from you, Papa? The word hit him like it did every time. Papa! She'd started calling him that 3 days ago. He hadn't corrected her, hadn't had the heart to. Not if I can help it, sweetheart. Promise. Lucas thought about all the promises he'd made and broken, to Sarah, to Emma, to himself. But he looked at Ruby's gap-toothed smile, and Grace's fierce eyes, and Danny's careful hope, and Zay's trust, and Lily's silence that was slowly breaking, and he made another promise anyway. I promise. The lawyer arrived at noon. Thomas Whitfield was 50 years old and looked like he'd spent every one of those years in courtrooms. Expensive suit, polished boots, the kind of confidence that came from winning more fights than you lost. Mr. Hartwell, he shook Lucas's hand with a firm grip. Mrs. Montgomery has told me about your situation. Quite extraordinary. That's one word for it. They sat at the kitchen table. The children gathered close listening. Whitfield pulled documents from his briefcase, spread them out like battle plans. Let me be direct. Reverend Crane has legal standing through the Children's Aid Society. His papers are legitimate. If this goes before Judge Morrison, he has a strong case. Lucas's heart sank. So we can't win. I didn't say that. I said he has a strong case. We need a stronger one. He tapped the documents. Guardianship. If you file for legal guardianship of all 5 children, you establish yourself as their primary caretaker. It's not adoption that takes longer, but it gives you standing to contest Crane's claim. What do I need? Whitfield counted on his fingers. First, proof of stable employment. You have that thanks to Mrs. Montgomery. Second, proof of suitable housing. You have that. Third, character references. Mrs. Montgomery will testify. Mrs. Bennett as well. Anyone else, Lucas thought. Maybe Sheriff Coulter, maybe Dr. Hayes. Good. And fourth, Whitfield paused, looked at the children. Testimony from the children themselves that they want to stay with you. Grace straightened. We get to speak if you choose to, and I'll be honest with you, young lady. Judges don't like tearing children away from people they've bonded with. If you five stand up in court and say you want to stay with Mr. Hartwell, it carries weight. Danny leaned forward. How much weight? Whitfield smiled slightly. Enough that it might make the difference. He stood, began packing his papers. I'll file the guardianship petition today. That should buy us some time. Crane can't legally remove you while the matter is pending before the court. How much time? Until Saturday, 10 a.m., 4 days. After Whitfield left, Lucas stood on the porch and tried to breathe. 4 days. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Hoofbeats approached through the snow. Sheriff Coulter appeared on horseback. 2 deputies behind him. Lucas's hand went to where his gun would be if he still carried one regularly. Coulter raised a hand. Easy, Hartwell. I'm not here to arrest you. Then why are you here? The sheriff dismounted. Walked to the porch. Up close, Lucas could see the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the weight of too many years doing a job that required compromise. To warn you. About Crane. He's not going to let this go. He's got connections, money, friends in Helena who owe him favors. So do I, Mrs. Montgomery. Coulter almost smiled. She's got influence, sure, but Crane's been doing this for years. He knows the system, knows which judges to talk to, which palms to grease. What are you saying? I'm saying you're going to lose. Maybe not today. Maybe not Saturday, but eventually. The law's on his side, and the law always wins. Lucas stepped closer. Then why are you here? Why warn me instead of just hauling me in? Coulter was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the snow-covered mountains, at the ranch spread out below them. Because I've seen those children, saw them in town before you came, saw the way everyone walked past, the way I walked past. His voice roughened. I told myself it wasn't my problem, told myself someone else would handle it, but nobody did. And now you're here doing what the rest of us should have done months ago. That doesn't answer my question. Coulter met his eyes. I'm not a good man, Hartwell. Did things in the war I'm not proud of. Things after that were worse, but even I've got limits. Those children deserve better than what Crane's got planned for them. So help us. I can't, not officially, not without losing my badge, but I can give you time. How? I can make sure any warrants get delayed, paperwork gets lost, deputies get reassigned, buy you a few extra days to build your case. Lucas studied the man's face, looking for the lie, the trap. He didn't find one. Why we were enemies. You said yourself I killed half your company. War's over. Coulter turned back to his horse. Maybe I'm tired of being on the wrong side of things. He mounted up, looked back one more time. Watch your back, Hartwell. Crane's coming, and he won't be alone. The sheriff and his deputies rode away. Lucas stood on the porch trying to process what had just happened. An old enemy offering help. Another piece falling into place. Another reason to hope. But hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment. Hope led to pain. The children were watching from the window. Grace, Danny, Lily, Zay, Ruby. 5 faces pressed against the glass. 5 reasons to hope, anyway. 2 hours later, a black buggy appeared on the ranch road. Lucas saw it coming from half a mile away, knew who it was before the buggy stopped, knew this confrontation had been inevitable since the moment he'd walked into Miller's cabin. Reverend Silas Crane stepped out. He was 45 years old and looked like every sketch Lucas had ever seen of the devil dressed for church. Thin, dark suit, white collar. A smile that didn't reach his eyes and probably never had. Mr. Hartwell, I presume. Lucas descended the porch steps, put himself between Crane and the cabin door. Reverend, I've come to discuss the Porter children. Nothing to discuss, they're staying with me. Crane's smile widened. I'm afraid it's not that simple. I have legal custody through the Children's Aid Society. You, on the other hand, are a stranger with no claim whatsoever. I'm the man who saved their lives while your society let them starve. Harsh words. Crane stepped closer. His voice stayed soft, reasonable, more dangerous than shouting would have been. I understand you've taken an interest in those poor orphans. Commendable, truly, but you're interfering with legal proceedings. I'm protecting them from being sold. Crane laughed. actually laughed. The sound was gentle, cultured, completely wrong. "Sold, my dear man, the Children's Aid Society places orphans with loving families. We've helped hundreds of children find homes." "How many of them are still alive?" The smile flickered. Lucas stepped closer. "I've heard about your special arrangements. The coal mines in Pennsylvania, the textile mills, the families who pay 50 cents a head for small bodies. I've heard about what happens to the colored children, why they're worth more." Crane's mask slipped, just for a second, long enough for Lucas to see what was underneath. Something cold, something calculating. "Those are vicious rumors spread by people who don't understand the complexities of charitable work." "Then you won't mind Mrs. Montgomery's lawyers investigating." Crane studied Lucas. The smile was gone now. In its place was something harder, sharper. "I know about you, Mr. Hartwell. I know about the fire in Kansas. I know about your daughter Emma, your wife Sarah. I know you failed them." Lucas's hands clenched into fists. "You failed your own daughter. Why would these children be different?" Lucas moved, fast. But before he could reach Crane, the cabin door burst open. Grace stood there, Danny beside her, both of them pale but determined. "Mr. Lucas, don't." Lucas stopped, breathing hard, wanting nothing more than to put his fist through Crane's smug face. Crane's smile returned. He looked at Grace, at Danny, at the other children visible behind them. "There they are, my charges. Don't worry, children. Soon you'll be with proper families, Christian families. You won't have to rely on the charity of drunken drifters anymore." He tipped his hat to Lucas. "I've contacted Judge Morrison in Helena. He's agreed to expedite the hearing." Lucas's blood went cold. "When?" Crane's smile became something cruel. "Day after tomorrow. December 20th, 10 a.m. at the courthouse. From 4 days to 2. I'll see you in court, Mr. Hartwell, and I'll see these children on a train east by Christmas." He climbed back into his buggy and rode away. Lucas stood in the snow shaking with rage and fear and helplessness. Grace came to his side, took his hand. "He's evil, yeah. Are we going to lose?" Lucas looked down at her, 11 years old, carrying the weight of the world, trusting him even though every adult she'd ever known had let her down. "Not if I have anything to say about it." That night the storm hit. Lucas saw it building all afternoon, a wall of gray swallowing the western mountains, moving fast, moving angry. "Everyone inside," he called. "Now!" They'd prepared. Beth had warned them that Montana blizzards could last for days, could drop temperatures so low that exposed skin froze in minutes. They had food, firewood, water, everything they needed to survive. Nothing could have prepared them for the sound. The wind hit like artillery fire. The cabin walls shook. The shutters screamed. Ruby started crying. Zay covered his ears. Even Danny went pale. "It's okay," Lucas said, pulling them away from the windows. "The cabin's solid. We're safe." "It sounds like it's trying to get in," Grace said. Her voice was tight with fear. Lucas pulled them all close. "It can try. It won't succeed." They huddled around the fire, all 6 of them. Lucas told stories about his time in the army, the funny ones, the ones that didn't involve death and blood and the screaming of dying men. Grace told stories their mother used to tell, about princes and princesses and happy endings. Danny recited facts about storms. It was how he dealt with fear, by understanding it. The worst blizzard in Montana history was 1856. Killed over 1,000 cattle and 67 people. They called it the White Death. "That's not helping Danny," Grace said. "I find it helpful to know what we're dealing with." "Well, the rest of us find it terrifying," Lucas cut in. "Enough. We're all scared. That's normal, but we're going to get through this together." The first day passed, then the second. By the third day, they'd fallen into a routine. Lucas kept the fire going, checked the walls for breaches, rationed food carefully. Grace managed the cooking and the younger children. Danny tracked the storm's progress by listening to the wind, and Lily started talking more. Not a lot, not constantly, but here and there she'd offer a comment, an observation, a memory. On the second night of the storm, she spoke up suddenly. "Mama used to sing during storms." Everyone went still. It was the longest sentence Lily had said since her parents died. Lucas kept his voice gentle. "Do you remember the song?" Lily nodded slowly. "Would you like to sing it for us?" For a long moment she just sat there, clutching patience, staring into the fire. Then, in a voice rusty from disuse, she began to sing. It was an old hymn, something about light in darkness and hope in despair. Her voice was thin, trembling. Not quite on key, but it was real. It was hers. It was the sound of a broken child learning to heal. The other children went completely still. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Danny swallowed hard. Zay wrapped his arms around Lily from behind, and Ruby climbed out of Lucas's lap to sit with her sister. When the song ended, no one spoke. Then Zay said, "Lily's talking again." Grace whispered, "She is." Lily looked at them all, her siblings, her family, and for the first time since her parents died, she smiled. It was small, fragile, like the first flower pushing through snow, but it was there. Lucas felt something break open in his chest, something that had been frozen for 4 years. These children, these brave, broken, beautiful children. They were teaching him how to live again, how to hope again, how to be something more than the ghost he'd become. Lucas felt something break open in his chest, something that had been frozen for 4 years. These children, these brave, broken, beautiful children. They were teaching him how to live again, how to hope again, how to be something more than the ghost he'd became. That night, long after the children had fallen asleep, Lucas sat by the fire keeping watch. The storm still raged outside. Tomorrow would be the 4th day. Maybe it would break. Maybe not. Then he heard it, through the howling wind, the sound of a horse. Lucas grabbed his rifle, moved to the door, opened it a crack. A black buggy fought through the blizzard, stopped 20 yards from the cabin. The door opened. Reverend Silas Crane stumbled out into the snow. Lucas stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. "You shouldn't be here." Crane looked different. His perfect suit was rumpled, his white collar stained. The mask he always wore had cracked wide open. What showed underneath was desperation. "Mr. Hartwell," his voice shook, "we need to talk. Court's in 2 days. We'll talk there." "There won't be a court," Crane shouted over the wind. "Don't you understand? I'm finished. The investigation, the warrants, I have nothing left." He reached inside his coat, pulled out a revolver. Lucas's finger moved to the trigger. "Put it down, Crane." "I can't." The gun trembled in Crane's hand. "I'm not leaving without those children. I need them. I have debts, promises I made to very dangerous men, people who will kill me if I don't deliver. That's your problem, not theirs." "You don't understand," Crane's voice broke. "I had a son once, Michael, 8 years old. We were so poor I couldn't afford medicine when he got sick. I held him while he died, felt him go cold in my arms." The gun wavered. "After that, I swore I'd never be poor again, never be powerless. The Children's Aid Society was supposed to help orphans, but then I saw how much money there was in it, how much the factories would pay. And I told myself one child wouldn't matter, then 2, then 5, then 14. His voice dropped to a whisper. I became the monster I was trying to survive. The cabin door burst open. Grace stood there, knife in her hand, the same knife she'd held to Lucas's throat that first night. Behind her, Danny limped out, then Lily, then Zay, carrying Ruby, all 5 children standing between Lucas and Crane. "You're not taking us," Grace said. Her voice was steady as stone. "Ever." Crane looked at them, really looked, at their faces, at their courage, at everything he'd tried to sell and couldn't break. Something inside him shattered. The gun lowered, slowly, then fell into the snow. "I'm sorry." Crane's knees buckled. He collapsed. "God help me, I'm so sorry." A voice came from the darkness. "He might, but I won't." Sheriff Coulter stepped from behind the buggy, gun drawn, 2 deputies with him. "Silas Crane, you're under arrest for child trafficking, fraud, attempted kidnapping, and about a dozen other charges." Coulter moved in. Handcuffs clicked around Crane's wrists. The Reverend didn't resist, just looked at the children one more time. "I hope you find what I lost," he whispered. "I hope you remember that family isn't bought or sold. It's chosen." Coulter hauled him to his feet, led him to the buggy. Lucas lowered his rifle, turned to the children. "Everyone back inside, now." They obeyed, all 5 of them filing past him. Grace paused, handed him the knife. "I won't need this anymore." Lucas took it. "No, you won't." Inside, he built up the fire, made hot chocolate, let the children process what they'd seen. Finally, Zay asked, "Is the bad man really gone?" Lucas pulled them all close. "Yeah, son, the bad man is really gone." On the fourth day, the storm finally broke. Lucas pushed the cabin door open and stepped into a world transformed. Snow piled higher than his waist. The sun blazed in a painfully blue sky. Everything was white and silent and still. Beautiful. Deadly. Both at once. He turned back to the children. "Stay inside. I need to check the road. Make sure we can get to town if we need to." Danny was already pulling on his coat. "I'm coming with you." "Your leg will make it harder. My leg is fine. I've been walking on it for 9 years. I know what I can handle." Lucas hesitated, then nodded. "All right. But if I say we turn back, we turn back. No arguments." "No arguments." They set out together, wading through snow that came up to Danny's chest in places. The boy struggled but didn't complain, used his arms to pull himself forward, jaw set with determination. After a while, Lucas said, "You're strong, stronger than you give yourself credit for." "I'm slow. My leg makes me slow." "Slow isn't weak. Slow just means it takes longer to get where you're going." Danny was quiet for a moment. "My father used to say that." They walked in silence. The snow crunched under their boots, their breath fogged in the frozen air. Then Danny said, "Mr. Lucas, yeah, do you think my father would have liked you?" Lucas considered the question. "I don't know. Maybe. I hope so." "I think he would have." Danny paused. "He liked people who kept their promises, people who showed up." "I'm trying to be that person." "I know." Danny stopped walking, looked up at Lucas. "And I think maybe he'd be okay with you being our father now, if that's what you want." The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. He stopped walking, turned to look at this 9-year-old boy with his bad leg and his sharp mind and his careful heart. "Is that what you want, for me to be your father?" Danny's jaw worked. His eyes were bright with tears he was too proud to shed. "I want to stop being afraid. I want to stop waiting for you to leave. I want to believe that when you say you're staying, you mean it. Forever." Lucas knelt in the snow, put himself at Danny's eye level. "I mean it." "Prove it." "How?" Danny looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "Call me son." Lucas's throat closed. He thought about his own son, the one he'd never had, the one Sarah had been carrying when the fire took her, the dream of a family that had died with them. And he thought about this boy, this brave, broken, brilliant boy who'd been through more than any child should have to endure. "Danny," Lucas said. His voice was rough. "Son?" Danny's face crumpled. For the first time since Lucas had met him, the boy cried, really cried, not silent tears, but deep, heaving sobs. The sound of a child who'd finally found something to hold on to. Lucas pulled him close and held him while he wept. "I've got you. I've got all of you. And I'm not letting go." They stood there in the snow, two people who'd both lost families, who'd both been running from grief, finding something unexpected in each other, something that felt like healing, something that felt like home. When they got back to the cabin, Grace was standing on the porch. Her face was white with panic. "Lucas, something's wrong. Ruby won't wake up." Lucas's blood turned to ice. He pushed past Grace through the door to where Ruby lay on the bed, so still, so pale, her chest barely moving. "What happened?" Grace was crying. "I don't know. She was fine this morning, playing with Zay. Then she said she was tired and lay down, and now she won't wake up." Lucas pressed his hand to Ruby's forehead. No fever, that was good, but her breathing was shallow, wrong. Her skin had a gray cast to it that made his stomach drop. "Has she eaten anything?" "Some bread, some water." "The water. Where did it come from?" Grace pointed to the barrel by the door. "The one we filled before the storm." Lucas crossed to the barrel, lifted the lid. A dead rat floated in the water. The world stopped. "How much did she drink?" Grace's face went gray. "I don't know. A cup, maybe 2. Lucas scooped Ruby into his arms. She was so light, so terrifyingly still. "I have to get her to town, to Dr. Hayes." "The road's blocked," Danny said from the doorway. "You saw it yourself." "Then I'll go through the fields, around the mountains, whatever it takes." Grace grabbed his arm. "Lucas, the snow." He looked at her, really looked. saw the terror in her eyes, the same terror she'd had 2 months ago when she'd been alone with 4 siblings and no help coming. "I don't care about the snow," his voice cracked. "I am not losing another child. Not again. Not ever again." Grace stared at him. Then she nodded. "Go, we'll be fine here. Lock the door, don't open it for anyone. I know, just go. Save her." Lucas ran. The horse struggled through the drifts, but Lucas pushed her harder than he'd ever pushed a horse before. Ruby was bundled against his chest, barely breathing, her small body growing colder with every passing minute. Not again, not again, not again. The words became a prayer, a mantra, the only thing keeping him from falling apart. Town appeared through the trees, buildings half buried in snow, smoke rising from chimneys, people emerging from homes to dig out. Lucas rode straight to Dr. Hayes's office, didn't bother to tie the horse, just burst through the door with Ruby in his arms. "Help her, the water was contaminated. She drank it this morning. She won't wake up." Hayes took one look and went pale. "Put her on the table, now." The next hour was the longest of Lucas's life. He stood in the corner of the doctor's office watching Hayes work, praying to a God he hadn't believed in for years, bargaining, promising, begging. "Please, please, please." Ruby lay on the table, small and still, while the doctor poured charcoal down her throat, pumped her stomach, checked her pulse over and over again. "Come on," Hayes muttered. "Come on, little one. Fight." Lucas's hands were shaking. His whole body was shaking. "Please." Ruby coughed. It was a small sound, weak and wet, but it was the most beautiful thing Lucas had ever heard. "That's it," Hayes said, relief flooding his voice. "That's it. Cough it up. Get it out of your system." Ruby's eyes fluttered open. "Papa?" Lucas's knees nearly gave out. He crossed to the table, took her small hand in his. "I'm here. I'm right here. My tummy hurts. I know, sweetheart. The doctor's helping you feel better. Was I sick again? A little? But you're going to be okay." Ruby's fingers tightened around his. You came to save me." Lucas could barely speak. "Always. I will always come. Promise, promise," she smiled. That gap-toothed, innocent smile that reminded him so much of Emma, it physically hurt. Then she closed her eyes, but this time she was sleeping, just sleeping. Lucas put his head down on the edge of the table and wept. He brought Ruby back to the cabin as the sun was setting. The other children were waiting on the porch, despite the cold, despite everything he'd told them about staying inside. Grace ran to meet him before he'd even dismounted. "Is she okay? Is she going to be okay?" "She's going to be fine. Doctor says she needs rest and clean water, but she's through the worst." Grace sagged with relief. Behind her, Danny was actually smiling. Zay was bouncing on his heels. Lily walked forward and touched Ruby's cheek. "I prayed," Lily said quietly. "The whole time you were gone. I prayed like Mama taught me." Lucas looked at her. This little girl who'd been silent for so long, who'd watched her parents die and decided the world was too terrible to speak to, who was learning slowly to trust again. I think it worked. That night, after the children were asleep, Lucas sat by the fire and made himself a promise. No more running, no more hiding, no more pretending he didn't care. These children were his. This was his family, and nothing was going to take them away. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. Morning came too fast. Lucas woke to find all 5 children already awake, already dressed. Grace had braided Ruby's hair with trembling fingers. Danny had polished his father's pocket watch until it gleamed. Zay stood straight and tall, refusing to let anyone see his fear. And Lily held his hand the whole way to town. The courthouse was packed. Mrs. Whitmore was there, Mrs. Perkins, Sarah Bennett, Sheriff Coulter standing in the back with his arms crossed, Beth Montgomery in the front row with Thomas Whitfield, and Reverend Silas Crane, thin and dark in his black suit, smiling like a man who'd already won. All rise. The Honorable Judge William Morrison presiding. Judge Morrison was old, white-haired, with eyes that had seen too much and believed too little. He settled into his chair, looked over the crowded courtroom, frowned. "This is a custody hearing, not a circus. I want order." Crane stood. His voice was smooth, reasonable. "Your Honor, I'll be brief. The facts are simple. 5 orphan children left without legal guardians after their parents' death from typhoid. The Children's Aid Society, an organization sanctioned by church and state, has arranged for their placement with families back east. Mr. Hartwell here has no legal standing, no blood relation, no right to interfere. Judge Morrison turned to Lucas. Mr. Hartwell, your response— Lucas stood. His legs felt weak. His mouth was dry. Your Honor, those children were dying when I found them. Starving. Freezing. Abandoned by this town for 2 months. Reverend Crane talks about legal standing. But where was the law when those children needed help? Where was the church? Where was anyone? The judge's expression didn't change. That's not the question before this court. Lucas stepped forward. It should be. The question isn't who has papers. The question is who actually cares about those children, who's been feeding them, housing them, protecting them. Not Reverend Crane, not the Children's Aid Society, me. Crane stood again. Your Honor, if I may. He pulled documents from his briefcase. The court should know something about Mr. Hartwell. He's a drifter with a history of violence. Gettysburg veteran, Union artillery, known for excessive force. After the war, he drank heavily, lost his own family in a fire due to negligence. He wasn't home when his wife Sarah and daughter Emma burned to death. The courtroom murmured. Lucas felt the blow like a fist to his chest. Crane continued, his voice dripping false concern. He has no stable history, no ties to this community, no reason to believe he can provide for these children long term. In fact, Your Honor, I have testimony from townspeople who say Mr. Hartwell threatened Dr. Hayes with violence, assaulted me verbally on my own property, has shown repeatedly that he is unstable and dangerous. Lucas wanted to speak, wanted to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. Then Whitfield stood. Your Honor, may I call witnesses? Proceed. Beth Montgomery took the stand first, testified that Lucas had a job, a cabin, stable income, that the children were thriving under his care. Sarah Bennett went second, told the story of that first night, how Lucas had risked everything for children he'd just met. Dr. Hayes went third and shocked everyone. Your Honor, I was wrong about Mr. Hartwell. That first night he didn't threaten me. He demanded I do my job. I was scared, cowardly. Mr. Hartwell forced me to face my duty, and because of that, Ruby Mae Porter is alive today. Hayes paused. He's not violent. He's desperate. There's a difference. Then Beth stood again. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence regarding Reverend Crane's Children's Aid Society. Crane went pale. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. I'll allow it. Beth pulled out a folder, thick with papers. Over the past 3 years, Reverend Crane has placed 14 children through his organization. I've had my lawyers conduct a thorough investigation. She read from the documents. 7 of those children are dead, died in factories and mines from overwork and malnutrition. 3 are missing, unaccounted for, and 4 are working in conditions that would make a prison look humane. The courtroom exploded, people shouting, Judge Morrison banging his gavel. Order, order. Beth wasn't finished. I also have evidence that Reverend Crane receives payment for each child placed. 50 cents for white children, $1 for colored children because they can work in tighter spaces in the mines. Crane lunged to his feet. Your Honor, these are lies, vicious lies. Do you deny receiving payment? The silence stretched. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Reverend Crane, answer the question. Crane's face went through several colors. Finally, he sat down. The judge turned to Beth. This is extremely serious. I'm ordering a full investigation into the Children's Aid Society's placement records. He looked at Crane. Until that investigation is complete, you are prohibited from removing any children from this territory. Any attempt to do so will result in your immediate arrest. Crane started to protest. The judge silenced him with a look. I'm not finished. Morrison turned to Lucas. Mr. Hartwell, your petition for guardianship is provisionally approved, pending the outcome of the investigation. Relief hit Lucas so hard he almost staggered, but the judge held up a hand. However, before I finalize this decision, I want to hear from the children themselves. He looked at Grace Danny, Lily Zay, and Ruby. Come forward, please. They stood together, walked to the front of the courtroom. 5 children who'd survived more than most adults ever would. The judge's voice was gentle now. I'm going to ask each of you a question. I want you to answer honestly, not what you think I want to hear, not what anyone told you to say. The truth. Understood? 5 nods. Do you want to stay with Mr. Hartwell? Grace spoke first. Her voice was fierce. Yes, Your Honor. He saved my sister's life. Twice. He's the first person who ever made me feel like we might actually be okay. She looked at Crane. The Reverend looks at us like we're money. Mr. Lucas looks at us like we're a family. Danny went next. Yes, sir. He listens. He doesn't treat me like I'm broken because of my leg. He called me son. Nobody ever called me that before. His voice cracked. And my father would have liked him. I know he would have. Zay stepped forward. His small voice carried through the silent courtroom. Yes, sir. He told me I count the same as anyone. Some people in this town don't think colored children matter. Mr. Lucas does. He looked directly at Mrs. Whitmore. He sees 5 children, not colors, just 5 children who need a home. Ruby bounced forward. Yes, he's scratchy like Papa, and he gives good hugs, and he came to save me when I was sick, twice. She climbed off the witness stand, ran to Lucas, climbed into his lap. The courtroom made soft sounds. Several people were crying. Then everyone looked at Lily, silent Lily, broken Lily, the little girl who'd watched her parents die and stopped speaking for weeks. She stood there, clutching patience, looking at the judge with those huge, solemn eyes. Lily, the judge's voice was infinitely gentle. Do you want to stay with Mr. Hartwell? Silence. Everyone held their breath. Then Lily walked forward, still holding the doll. She stopped in front of the judge. When she spoke, her voice was rusty but clear. He promised. He promised he'd keep us safe, and he does, every day. Tears streamed down her face. When everyone else walked past, he stopped. When everyone else said it was too hard, he stayed. When I couldn't talk, he listened anyway. Her voice grew stronger. He's not like Reverend Crane. Reverend Crane wants to take us away and make money. Mr. Lucas wants to love us and keep us safe. She looked around the courtroom, at all the people who'd walked past Miller's cabin for 2 months. He's the first person who didn't give up on us. Please don't make him give us up now. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Judge Morrison removed his glasses, wiped his eyes. Around the room, people were crying. Mrs. Whitmore, Mrs. Perkins, Sarah Bennett. Even Sheriff Coulter's eyes were wet. The judge put his glasses back on. I've heard enough. He looked at Lucas. Mr. Hartwell, your petition for guardianship is approved. Pending the investigation, you have full legal custody of Grace Daniel Lily Zay and Ruby Porter. He turned to Crane. Reverend, you are ordered to cease all activities related to the Children's Aid Society until the investigation is complete. If the allegations prove true, criminal charges will be filed. The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. For a moment, Lucas couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't believe what had just happened. Then Grace slammed into him. Then Danny. Then all 5 of them were wrapped around him, crying and laughing and holding on like they'd never let go. We did it, Grace whispered into his shoulder. We actually did it. Lucas held them tight, all 5 of them, his children. Yes, sweetheart, we did. Around them the courtroom was moving, people coming forward. Mrs. Whitmore with tears on her face apologizing. Sarah Bennett hugging the children. Beth Montgomery shaking Whitfield's hand. And in the back, Sheriff Coulter caught Lucas's eye. Nodded once. Then the sheriff walked over to where Crane sat. Stunned. Defeated. Reverend Crane, you need to come with me. We have some questions about your organization's finances. Crane looked up. For the first time, his mask was completely gone. What showed underneath was ugly, desperate. You can't do this. I have connections. I have friends who will... Coulter interrupted. You had friends, past tense. Let's go. He led Crane out in handcuffs. The courtroom emptied slowly. People shaking Lucas's hand, congratulating him, apologizing for not helping sooner. Finally, it was just Lucas and the children and Beth and Whitfield. Thank you, Lucas said to them both. I couldn't have done this without you, Beth smiled. You already had. We just made it legal. She knelt down to the children's level. You 5 are the bravest people I've ever met, and I'm honored to be part of your family now. Ruby hugged her, then Zay, then all of them. Outside, the snow had started falling again, soft and gentle this time. Not a blizzard. Just winter, being winter. Lucas gathered the children close. "Let's go home." Grace looked up at him, still holding Emma's medallion around her neck. "Do you want this back now? You said when it was over—" Lucas closed her fingers around it. "Keep it. You're my daughter now, Grace. That means everything I have is yours, including the memories." Grace threw her arms around him and cried, happy tears this time. They walked out of the courthouse together, into the snow, into the future, into whatever came next. Behind them, the town that had walked past was learning to look again, learning to care again, learning that sometimes strangers who stop matter more than neighbors who never did. Ahead of them, a ranch, a home, a life they would build together. One stranger, 5 children, one family. It was enough. It was everything. Spring came to Montana the way forgiveness comes to broken hearts, slowly, painfully. Then all at once. Lucas woke on the first warm morning to find Ruby standing at the window, her small hand pressed against the glass. "The snow's melting," she said. "Does that mean winter's over?" "Almost." He crossed to stand beside her. "Few more weeks, and it'll be gone completely." "Good. I don't like winter anymore." Lucas understood that. 3 months had passed since the trial. 3 months since Ruby had almost died from contaminated water. 3 months since they'd stood in a courtroom and become a family in the eyes of the law. The investigation into Reverend Crane's Children's Aid Society had turned up exactly what Beth Montgomery had predicted. Records of children sold to factories and mines across the East Coast. 14 children placed in 3 years, 7 dead, 3 missing, the rest scarred in ways that might never heal. Crane had fled before the authorities could arrest him, gone to ground somewhere back east. Sheriff Coulter had told Lucas there were warrants out in 3 territories. Man like that, he's got connections, safe houses, people who owe him favors. But there's warrants out now. He shows his face anywhere civilized he's done. It wasn't enough. Lucas wanted the man in chains, wanted him to pay for every child he'd sold, every life he'd destroyed. But it was something. And in the meantime, there was work to do. The adoption papers had arrived in April. Whitfield had brought them himself, riding out from Helena with a briefcase full of documents and a smile Lucas had never seen on a lawyer's face before. "It's official," Whitfield said, spreading the papers across the kitchen table. Grace Catherine Hartwell Porter, Daniel Thomas Hartwell Porter, Lily Rose Hartwell Porter, Isaiah William Hartwell Porter, Ruby May Hartwell Porter. Lucas stared at the names, his name attached to theirs, making it real, making it permanent. "They wanted to keep Porter as a middle name," Whitfield continued, "said it was important to remember where they came from. They talked to you about that. They talked to everyone about that, made sure we understood it wasn't negotiable." Whitfield chuckled. "You've got strong-willed children, Mr. Hartwell. Don't I know it?" The children gathered around the table, each of them touching the papers like they were sacred texts. Grace traced her new name with one finger. Danny read every word, checking for errors. Zay just stared, his eyes bright with tears he was trying not to shed. And Lily picked up the document with her name on it and held it against her chest. "It's real," she whispered. "We're really yours now." Lucas knelt down to her level. "You were always mine. This just makes it so the law agrees." Ruby tugged at his sleeve. "Papa," the word still hit him like a punch to the chest every time. She'd been calling him that for 3 months now. He'd stopped trying to correct her after the first week. "Yeah, sweetheart. Does this mean we're really a family now? Forever and ever?" Lucas looked at all of them. Grace, Danny, Lily, Zay, Ruby. 5 children who'd been strangers 4 months ago. 5 children who were his whole world now. We were already a family. The papers are just for other people, so they know what we already knew. What's that? That we belong to each other, all of us, no matter what. Ruby threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Papa." The words cracked something open inside him, something he'd kept sealed since the fire in Kansas, something he thought would never heal. "I love you too, baby girl." The celebration that followed was small but perfect. Beth Montgomery brought champagne, real champagne all the way from Denver. Sarah Bennett came with a cake she'd baked herself, 3 layers tall with white frosting and 5 candles, 1 for each child. "Make a wish," Sarah said, holding the cake out to them. The children gathered around, looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Grace said, "We don't need to wish for anything. We already have everything we want." They blew out the candles together. Sheriff Coulter stopped by. Still awkward, still uncomfortable, but there nonetheless. He brought a gift. A wooden box hand carved with the children's initials burned into the lid. "Made it myself," he said gruffly. "Figured they could keep important things in it." Danny took the box, examined it with those analytical eyes. "This is excellent craftsmanship, Sheriff. I'm no artist. I didn't say you were. I said it was excellent craftsmanship. That's different." Coulter almost smiled. Almost. "You're a strange kid, Danny Hartwell." "I prefer unusual. Strange has negative connotations." This time Coulter did smile. The party wound down as the sun set. Margaret left with promises to check on them tomorrow. Sarah cleaned up, refusing help as always. Coulter disappeared into the evening with a nod that said more than words could. And then it was just the six of them. Family. The first day of school came on a Monday in May. Lucas walked all 5 children to the small schoolhouse 2 miles east of the ranch. Ruby held his right hand. Lily held his left. Grace, Danny, and Zay walked ahead, bickering about something. They were always bickering about something these days, the way siblings did. Miss Hannah Price stood in the doorway, 28 years old, kind eyes. A no-nonsense manner that reminded Lucas of Beth Montgomery. "Mr. Hartwell, I've been expecting you." Lucas gestured to the children. "These are my children, Grace, Danny, Lily, Zay, and Ruby." The words came out easy now, natural, like he'd been saying them his whole life. "Welcome to Frost Hollow School," Miss Price said, smiling at each of them in turn. "We're glad to have you." Zay stepped forward. His voice was quiet, careful. "Miss Price, will there be other children here who look like me?" The teacher's expression softened. "Not right now, Zay. But there will be children who judge you by who you are, not what you look like. I make sure of that in my classroom." Zay nodded slowly. "Okay." Lucas knelt down to say goodbye. Suddenly, all 5 of them were pressing close, reluctant to let go. "I'll be right here when school ends," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." Ruby looked up at him with those big eyes. "Promise." "Promise." He watched them file into the schoolhouse, Grace with her chin high, Danny with his careful limp. Lily still clutching patience, though she talked now, smiled now, laughed now. Zay walking straight and tall, despite his fear. Ruby bouncing with excitement. His children, his family. The door closed behind them. Lucas stood there for a long moment, looking at the schoolhouse, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. "They'll be fine." He turned. Sheriff Coulter sat on horseback a few yards away, watching with an unreadable expression. "I know." "Then why are you still standing there?" Lucas thought about that. "Because I spent too long walking away from things. Figured I'd practice staying for a while." Coulter almost smiled. "You're a strange man, Hartwell. I prefer unusual." This time Coulter actually laughed. A short, surprised sound, like he'd forgotten he knew how. "Danny's been rubbing off on you. All of them have." Coulter was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I got news this morning. Thought you'd want to hear it." Lucas tensed. "What news?" "Crane. Found dead in a boarding house in Denver. Shot twice in the chest. Nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything." Lucas felt something dark and satisfied settle in his chest. "Who did it?" Coulter shrugged. "Don't know. Don't particularly care to find out. Man like that, he made a lot of enemies. Could have been anyone." He gathered his reins. "Point is, he's not coming for your children. That's what matters." Your children. Even the sheriff was saying it now. "Thank you for telling me." Coulter nodded, turned his horse toward a town, then stopped. "Hartwell." Lucas looked up. "You ever want to stop being a man with regrets, you know where to find me. There's always work at the ranch, always room at the table." Something complicated crossed Coulter's face. "I'll think about it." He rode away. Lucas walked back to the ranch alone, but he didn't feel alone anymore. He could feel them with him. Grace's fierce protectiveness, Danny's quiet strength, Lily's hard-won voice, Zay's stubborn joy, Ruby's boundless love. They were part of him now, woven into the fabric of who he was, and he was part of them. Summer arrived with long days and warm nights. The children thrived. Grace made friends at school, real friends, girls her own age who didn't care about her past, only her present. Danny discovered a talent for mathematics that made Miss Price talk about colleges back east. He's exceptional, Mr. Hartwell, truly exceptional. With the right education, he could be anything. Lily started singing again, her voice growing stronger every day. Sometimes Lucas would wake to hear her singing while she did chores. The sound filled the cabin like sunlight. Zay stood up to a bully who called him names, earned the respect of every child in the schoolyard, came home with a black eye and a smile that said he'd won something more important than a fight. Ruby learned to read and wouldn't stop showing off to anyone who would listen. And Lucas learned what it meant to be a father again. He learned that bedtime was a negotiation, not a decree, that skinned knees required bandages and sympathy in equal measure, that nightmares didn't go away just because you loved someone. You had to be there when they woke, had to hold them until the fear passed, had to prove again and again that you weren't going anywhere. He learned that patience wasn't just waiting. It was staying calm when Ruby spilled milk on his last clean shirt. It was explaining long division to Danny for the 15th time. It was listening to Grace's problems without trying to fix them. It was giving Lily space to be quiet without making her feel broken for needing it. It was answering Zay's endless questions about everything without once losing his temper. He learned that love wasn't a feeling. It was a choice you made every single day, over and over, until it became as natural as breathing. On a Sunday evening in late August, they gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. Ruby sat in Lucas's lap. Lily leaned against his shoulder. Danny and Grace argued about something. They were always arguing, those two. But Lucas had learned to let them work it out themselves. Zay lay on his back counting the first stars as they appeared. Papa, Ruby's voice was sleepy, content. "Yeah, sweetheart. Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. He thought about it, really thought, about Clara and Emma buried in Kansas, about 4 years of running, about the night he'd ridden into Frost Hollow expecting to find nothing but whiskey and oblivion, about a cabin falling apart, a girl with a knife, 5 children who'd been abandoned by everyone, and he thought about now, this porch, this sunset, these children, his children. "Yeah," he said, "I'm happy. Really. I don't know about forever happy, but right now tonight with all of you, yeah, I'm happy." Ruby snuggled closer. "Me too." Grace stopped arguing with Danny long enough to look over. "What are you two talking about? Papa says he's happy." Grace's voice was teasing, but her eyes were soft. Took him long enough to figure that out. Lucas smiled. "I'm a slow learner. The slowest." But she smiled when she said it. The sun dipped below the mountains. The stars came out one by one. The same stars that had watched over them through the worst of it, the storm, the sickness, the fear, the uncertainty. Lucas pulled his children close and let himself feel what he'd been running from for 4 years. Gratitude, hope, love. He'd lost everything once, had been certain he'd never recover, never heal, never find a reason to stop running. But then he'd walked into a falling down cabin in the middle of a Montana winter and found 5 children who needed him. 5 children who'd saved him right back. Grace, Danny, Lily, Zay, Ruby, his family, his home, his future. "Papa," Ruby's voice was barely a whisper now, almost asleep. "Yeah, sweetheart. Tell us a story." Lucas looked at his children. All 5 of them gathered close, safe, loved. "All right, let me tell you about a man who had nothing left to lose." The children settled in to listen. Even Grace and Danny stopped arguing. "This man," Lucas continued, "he had a wife who loved him and a daughter who thought he hung the moon. He had a little farm in Kansas and dreams of building something that would last." "What happened?" Ruby asked, though she'd heard this story before. "There was a fire. While the man was away working, a fire swept through and took everything. His home, his wife, his little girl, everything he loved gone in a single night." The children were silent, listening. The man wanted to die after that, thought about it every day, but he was too much of a coward to do it himself. So instead, he started running. Figured if he kept moving, he'd eventually find a place where the memories couldn't reach him. "Did he find it?" Danny asked quietly. "No. Turns out you can't outrun grief. It follows you wherever you go, patient as death, waiting for you to stop long enough to feel it." "So what happened?" Lucas looked at each of them in turn. "One day the man rode into a small town in Montana. He wasn't looking for anything except whiskey and a bed. But then he heard about 5 children, 5 orphans who'd been left to die by people who should have helped them." Ruby's eyes went wide. "That's us." "That's you." "What did the man do?" "He walked into a falling down cabin and found a girl with a knife pointed at his throat. She was 11 years old and scared out of her mind, but she was standing between him and her siblings like she'd fight the devil himself to protect them." Grace's face flushed. "The man looked at that girl and saw something he'd forgotten existed. Courage, love, the willingness to sacrifice everything for the people you care about." "Did he help them?" Zay asked. "He tried. It was messy and hard, and he made a lot of mistakes, but eventually those children taught him something he'd forgotten." "What?" Lucas's voice softened. "That family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Ruby looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Is that the happy ending?" Lucas gestured at all of them, gathered close in the firelight. "The happy ending is right now. The man found 5 children who needed a father, and 5 children found a man who needed them just as much. So everyone lives happily ever after." Lucas thought about that. "I don't know about ever after. That's a long time, and there's no telling what tomorrow will bring. But right now, tonight, everyone's happy." Ruby smiled, closed her eyes. "I like that story." "Me too, sweetheart, me too." One by one, the children drifted off to sleep. Ruby first, then Zay, then Lily, then Danny, who'd been reading but whose eyes kept closing. Only Grace stayed awake. She sat with Lucas on the porch steps, looking out at the stars. After a long silence, she reached into her pocket and pulled out Emma's medallion. "You said to give this back when it was over, when I didn't need proof anymore that you were coming back." Lucas looked at the medallion, the only thing he had left of his daughter. "Keep it." Grace's eyes went wide. "What? Keep it?" "You're my daughter now, Grace. That means everything I have is yours, including the memories. But it was Emma's, and now it's yours, all of you." He closed her fingers around the medallion. "Emma would have loved you, would have loved having sisters and brothers. She used to beg me and Sarah for a big family." Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks. "I'll take care of it, I promise." "I know you will." She hugged him then, really hugged him. Not the awkward, hesitant embraces of the past few months, but a real hug, full of trust and love and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for saving us, for staying, for loving us even when we were broken." Lucas held her tight. "You saved me right back." They sat together in the darkness, father and daughter, stranger and orphan, 2 broken people who'd found each other and learned to heal. The stars burned bright overhead. The children slept. And Lucas Hartwell, who had spent 4 years running from everything that mattered, finally understood what home meant. It wasn't a place, it wasn't walls or a roof or land. It was the people you chose to love, the people who chose to love you back, the ones who stayed. These 5 children, these brave, broken, beautiful children, they were his now. And he was theirs. Grace, Danny, Lily, Zay, Ruby, his family, his home, his future. The man who'd been ready to die had found something worth living for, and he was never letting go. "Papa." Ruby stirred in his arms. "Yeah, sweetheart. Tell us the ending again, the happy part." Lucas smiled. "Once upon a time there was a man who had nothing left to lose. He rode into a small town in Montana looking for an ending. Instead, he found a beginning." "What kind of beginning?" "The best kind. A family." Ruby's voice was so small now, almost dreaming. "And did they live happily ever after?" Lucas looked at his children. All 5 of them gathered close, safe, loved, home. "Yeah, sweetheart, they did." The stars burned on. The night deepened. But inside the small cabin on Montgomery Ranch, there was warmth, there was light. There was the sound of breathing and the crackle of fire and the feeling of being exactly where you were supposed to be. Lucas sat there until dawn, holding his children, counting his blessings. feeling his heart beat with a rhythm he'd thought he'd lost forever. Broken things could heal. Lost things could be found. Dead hearts could learn to beat again. All it took was 5 children, 1 stranger, and the courage to stop walking past. Blood doesn't make family. Choice makes family. And Lucas Hartwell had chosen. Every day, every moment, every breath, he'd chosen to stay, to fight, to love. And in choosing them, he'd found himself. Home at last. The end.